We are thrilled that you are all here with us tonight for our Parent Guardian Speaker Series. Tonight we are talking about pre-K to kindergarten transition. We are so excited to have Mary Rose Cantina and Mary Beth Monseranis, I hope I said that right, from MCPS, who will be providing our presentation tonight. Just a little background on us. The Down Syndrome Network, our mission is to empower and support individuals with Down syndrome, their families, and the community through education, information, public awareness, and advocacy. And I know there's someone on here whose child does not have Down syndrome, and that doesn't matter. We are, provide support and programming for people with a variety of developmental disabilities, and we are thrilled that you are here. Please stay on mute during the presentation. It looks like this might be a very small presentation, so we might be able to be a little more interactive than we typically are. We welcome cameras on so that the speakers can see the participants. Please use the chat feature or raise your hand using the reactions tab to ask questions. For Spanish interpretation, you're going to click on the interpretation icon that looks like a world globe at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish to listen to the Spanish interpreters. And we might go back over those instructions if and when a Spanish speaking family does join this meeting. For closed captions, click on the live transcript and then it will show the subtitles. Please keep your questions general. So this is not a time to ask a very specific question about your individual child. And at the end of the presentation, I will put a link in the chat so that you can complete an evaluation so we know how the program was. Oh, looks like we have a Spanish speaker coming in right now. So you know what? Let me see. Let's wait. Okay. Do you think that let's switch to the Spanish. We're going to open up the Spanish channel now. So why don't I pause for a minute and one of our interpreters can give the instructions to the family that just signed on. Okay. So now I'm going to click on interpretation and hit start. Language interpreter available, then it says click here to get started. So do I click that again? I'm going to assume it's started.
That's what the people click.
Okay. All right. So our last slide, I'm just going to introduce our awesome presenters for this evening. So first we have Mary Rose Cantina. She began her career in education at the Montgomery Primary Achievement Center at the ARC of Montgomery County. He then moved on to become a PEP teacher for Montgomery County Public Schools, followed by a position as a PEP program support specialist and an instructional specialist. She then spent 10 years as the instructional specialist to the director of the Division of Pre-Kindergarten, Special Programs, and Related Services in the Office of Special Education. She returned to PEP as the coordinator in 2022, where she works with an amazing team of specialists and coaches to coordinate and support PEP staff members, families, and students throughout the county. Mary Beth has worked in education for 33 years as a general educator, special educator, and school principal. And we are so lucky to have such two skilled and talented and knowledgeable professionals here with us tonight. Mary Beth has been the Family Support Services Coordinator for Montgomery County Public Schools for the past 2 years, where she continues to increase collaborative relationships between MCPS and families by assisting families with the special education process while providing information about disabilities, the school system, and community resources. So I will remind everybody that this presentation is being recorded. So towards the end, when we get to the question and answer period, I will try to remember to turn off the recording, and feel free to send me a note in the chat and remind me to turn the recording off in case I forget. So without further ado, I'm going to pull up their presentation and they're going to go ahead and get started. 1 second, let me open your presentation, your screen. Okay, and I'm trying.
You got a presentation mode.
Yeah, up in the right-hand corner, there should say slideshow mode, presentation.
This is what I'm looking for. I know. Why am I not seeing it?
Do you have the slides open in Google? Looks like it.
Yeah. So why am I not seeing?
Towards the right, is there a place?
Slideshow. Here I go. Yeah. Presenter.
Yeah, just click. There you go.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. All right.
So I think you can move to the next slide.
Okay.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm just going to quickly say that I'm Mary Rose Katina, and I am the coordinator of the preschool education program, the PEP program for Montgomery County Public Schools. I'm thrilled to be here this evening, and I just let Mary Beth say a quick hello to everyone, too.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you.
Okay, so we can move to the next slide. Just going to change my view here for a minute. There we go. Okay, so these are our meeting outcomes for this evening. And what we're going to talk about tonight is really an overview of kindergarten and the kindergarten transition process, a little bit about the continuum of kindergarten services in Montgomery County Public Schools, and some information about resources for you as families. And again, a little bit about the IEP process and any related topics. So this is a little bit of some questions for you. We're going to take you back down memory lane and think about what you remember from your kindergarten experience. And when you think about kindergarten today, how do you think that compares to your experience? And what are your expectation or goals for your child when you think about he or she going to kindergarten? And if anyone has anything they would like to share, we would love to hear from you. Or if you're more comfortable dropping something in the chat, that's fine too. So anything anyone wants to share? Thinking back to kindergarten, a long time ago, right? No.
Oh, that's me.
I
So
know I don't have a child in kindergarten, but I remember my first day of kindergarten. And do you know what I remember the most? I remember we were supposed to collect the cylinders from oatmeal because they used them for art projects, like the Quaker oatmeal.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
wow.
I remember. And I mean, I can remember from my kids who are much older than the people who are on that, like the expectations for kindergarten, I think, are higher than they were when we were all children. So I do think perhaps the expectations have changed.
And I think Mary Beth actually said that too.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember a lot of play in kindergarten, lots of it, right? And when I first started teaching, I was a kindergarten teacher, and I was like, what is going on right now? There's a lot of like teaching kids to read. Like, what happened to teaching kids how to just be kids and interact and all of those things? And obviously, that we still do that as well. And then when I think about when my son went to kindergarten, for me, I really just wanted him to feel loved and included and well cared for. I honestly did not care about the academics, which, is probably in direct opposition to what I should be saying now as, an employee of MCPS. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think the difference is there. Yeah, Christy said the same thing. Haiti had a good teacher. We like that. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's true of many of us. If we think back on our kindergarten experience, I feel the same way. I remember a lot of play. I remember nap time, snack time. And it's true, things are different today. There are more academics because, there is a focus on our kids, really being able to read and to be able to do math. But there is also a very big part of kindergarten that is about working with your friends and collaborating with your peers and how you work together and, just those social emotional skills as well. Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide. Okay, so this is just some general information about kindergarten that any students who are turning 5 on or before September 1st of this year, 2024, will enter kindergarten on August 26, 2020. Kindergarten, where your child would be considered for kindergarten, your neighborhood kindergarten school, is based on your home address. That's a little bit different than pre-K because in pre-K, we base things a lot. We include, based on child cares and daycares, if a child's in a private preschool. Kindergarten is based on your home address. And as I said a minute ago, we're going to talk a little bit tonight. There is a continuum of services that are available in special education for students with disabilities for kindergarten. Next slide. So what does kindergarten look like? What's a general education classroom schedule? You can see that kindergarten meets for 6 hours and 25 minutes a day, 5 days a week. So kindergarten is now a full day. I saw a couple people mention that their kindergarten was half day. Mine was too. But now kindergarten is school and it's full elementary day, 6 hours and 25 minutes every day of the week. The schedule does include English language arts, which is our literacy and early reading, mathematics, science, and social studies instruction. Our students do attend what we call specials, art, music, and physical education for approximately 30 minutes a week. And they do eat lunch in the cafeteria and go to recess with their grade level peers. The class sizes do vary depending on the school. Title I schools and focus schools typically have smaller class sizes, which can be about 16 to 18 students, and other schools have larger class sizes. Okay, next slide. So the early weeks of kindergarten. And, this is really for all students. This is not about students with disabilities. This is for all students entering kindergarten that are, students have to learn how to follow routines, classroom expectations. They have to become comfortable walking around and navigating the school building. They have to get accustomed to eating in the cafeteria, going to recess. And again, as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest components of learning in kindergarten is that collaboration and cooperation with your peers and feeling like and becoming part of a classroom community. So many children do not enter kindergarten on the first day knowing these skills. And, it's interesting, we often find that our students who have received pre-K services in PEP or another one of our special education services, sometimes our children, even though they have IEPs, do a better job of some of these early skills because they've practiced them. They've been in school. And some children without IEPs really need to learn about the routines and how you get used to being in a school building. So a lot of time, the early weeks of kindergarten for all children is spent on teaching and reinforcing just these early skills. And, some children will need support throughout the entire year for these skills, but that doesn't prevent them from being a valuable part of that classroom community. And one thing that always comes up is that, a child being toilet trained is not a required skill for kindergarten and for entry into kindergarten in any of the neighborhood schools. Okay, next slide. So getting ready for kindergarten. We recognize that in pre-K that entering kindergarten is a really exciting time for our parents and guardians and families, but it also can be filled with a lot of emotions and, anxiety. So if you have a student who is currently in receiving pre-K services in Montgomery County Public Schools, whether that be in PEP or through a different type of services in the county, your parent educator for PEP or your program specialist for one of the other services, they'll speak to you about the kindergarten transition process, and it might be in a parent group that they've offered, or it might be individually, but you can always go to them if you've gone to a group and you need more information. They are really there to help you understand this process, help you to feel comfortable, and help you to be a part of it. Most of our PEP students do transition to their home schools, their neighborhood schools for kindergarten. MCPS does have a regulation for school visitors, for parents and guardians to visit neighborhood schools. And we really encourage every family who has a child who's transitioning to kindergarten to visit their neighborhood school. And all schools are expected to welcome families. Now, they do it differently. Not everybody does it the same. So some schools do individual visits. Some schools do group visits. Some principals offer coffees. Every school does it different, and that's the prerogative of the principal and the school community. But they do accommodate and they are open to these visits. So please, certainly if you have a child transitioning, you should contact your neighborhood school and at least, and get to see the kindergarten classrooms, the kindergarten services there. Let's see. Is there anything else? Our IEP teams, this is really important that our IEP teams, all IEP teams, they must consider the homeschool kindergarten and whether a child's IEP goals can be met there and whether the child can receive the appropriate special ed services and supports in the homeschool before moving on to talk about anything outside of the neighborhood school. That is the law. That is what we want all children to have the opportunity to have if it is appropriate for them. So the services are recommended outside of the home school only when the IEP team, which you are a part of, determines that the student's needs cannot be met in the general education setting. So as part of that, you might be encouraged to also look at some other special education services in the county, some other types of classes, and your parent educator or specialist would talk to you about when those visits are and, when you could go on those. Some of them are virtual, some of them are in person, but you would receive all that information. If you're advised to look at some other services beyond the homeschool, then, we ask that you make the effort to go on the tour or participate in the virtual tour when it is arranged, because we try to set up the visits so that it's the least disruptive to the classrooms and the children in those classrooms. And because then there would always be someone there, a parent educator, a program specialist, or someone there with you to be able to talk about what you're seeing, be able to answer questions. And so it's really important that that families realize that the parent educators, the program specialists are there really to support you through this process and to answer any questions for you and to provide additional information when you have questions. So that was a lot for that one slide, but we're ready to move on.
Mary Rose,
Yes.
quick thing. We just had a question about ability to visit programs. So do you want to address that at the end, or do you want to do that now?
I mean, I'm flexible. I can certainly try to answer it now. This is a very small group. I'm not looking at the chat, Mary Beth, so.
Okay, only because I think it's relevant for people. You just talked about folks who are having like their meetings, right? And so if schools are making any recommendations, parents are wondering if they're allowed to visit in person, not only the homeschool, but also some of the other programs that are being recommended.
Sure. So the homeschool, I talked about that, your neighborhood school, and that would be something in person. As I said, you would want to contact the principal, contact the school. Regarding other services that your team might be considering, that they've suggested that you take a look at. Some of it, depending on the services, some of the tours are in person, some of them are virtual. When they're virtual, though, they are not that we're going to just give you a link and say, watch this from home. The parent educator is setting that up so that they're going to say, come here. I'm going to be there with other families and you. We're going to have up on the screen the tour, and we're going to be talking about what you're seeing, and we're going to be answering questions. So it depends on the type of services that you're looking at, whether the tour would be in person or virtual, but there are tours set up for all the various services in the county. Okay, I think now we're ready to move on. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit now about instruction and assessment. And I want to be really clear that there is only one curriculum in MCPS for all students. And all students receive access to the curriculum. The majority of students are working on grade level outcomes. There is a very small percentage of students that requires some instruction and assessment on what we call alternate learning outcomes. And these alternate learning outcomes are aligned to the one general education curriculum. The IEP team would be discussing at your meeting if there's a consideration that your child should be instructed on alternate learning outcomes and instead of the grade level outcomes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference. Again, with the stipulation that it's a very small percentage of students overall that should be instructed on alternate learning outcomes versus the general outcomes. So if you look over towards the left on the screen, you'll see that with the grade level outcomes, their students are instructed on the Maryland College and Career Readiness Standards and the Next Generation Science Standards. For students who are on the alternate learning outcomes, We use the essential elements that create a bridge from the grade level content standards to the academic expectations. And all that means is that the essential elements, the essential part of the standard is what is pulled out for students to work on instead of the entire grade level standard. As I said a minute ago, most students with IEPs are instructed on grade level outcomes. There's a small number of students that have significant cognitive disabilities determined by the IEP team, and those are the students that are instructed on the alternate learning outcomes. The grade level outcomes include the full depth and complexity of the content from the grade level. The alternate learning outcomes, there's a reduced breadth and depth of the general education curriculum. So that's back to sort of what I was saying a minute ago, where the standard, it's the same standard, but the essential components of that standard are pulled out. And that is what the students are instructed on instead of the entire depth and breadth of the standards. The grade level outcomes do prepare students to earn a high school diploma. The alternate learning outcomes prepare students to earn a certificate of program completion. And the reason for the difference there too is that when students are not assessed on the full depth of the curriculum, they generally don't have the opportunity to earn high school credits to receive the Maryland High School diploma. However, we're at a very young age when we're talking about this. So that has to be revisited every year. So even our students that are very young that are going to be instructed on alternate learning outcomes, they may still be on track to earn a diploma at a very young age, knowing that the longer that a child is instructed on alternate outcomes, then they may not be able to earn the diploma as they get older because they won't have the depth and breadth of the curriculum. But that is really something that becomes much more critical as children get older. Next slide. So this is just an example of what I was just talking about so that you can see the difference between the grade level outcome and the alternate learning outcome. And you can see here that the grade level outcome is much more complex and the alternate learning outcome is simplified really to focus on the concepts of counting and one-to-one correspondence. But it is still the same type of standard that the students are working on. Okay, I think we can move to the next slide. Just a little bit more about the alternate learning outcomes. The decision to align the instruction to the alternate learning framework is a very significant recommendation that an IEP team makes for a student's education. And we don't take these decisions lightly at all. When the discussion about whether a student should be instructed and assessed on these alternate learning outcomes does occur at an IEP team meeting with the family as part of that IEP team. And we always need to start with the fact that can the child be instructed in the general education curriculum and participate in general assessment. And as I said, most of our students, even students who have intellectual disabilities, should participate in the general education curriculum. When the IEP team suspects that a student may be eligible for the instruction and assessment on alternate standards, there is a very lengthy discussion that needs to take place at the IEP meeting, because again, this is a very important and significant decision to make for a student. So there is a very specific process that the State Department of Education has passed on to school systems that we have to follow. And it really involves a lot of discussion around very specific criteria, which I'm not going to go into at this meeting. If this is something that could possibly be considered for your child, then your parent educator is probably speaking with you about this process so that you have an understanding, or you can certainly ask more questions, because we would want you to have a good understanding of what could be discussed at the IEP meeting. I think we're ready for the next slide. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about transportation. Transportation is discussed at your IEP meeting, and most of our students going to their home schools, they ride the general education bus or they walk with their neighborhood peers. Sometimes we have students who are going to their neighborhood school that the IEP team determines that they do require some specialized supports. So the team may recommend specialized instruction, even for a specialized transportation, even for students going to their home school. But most of the time, students do ride the general education bus. If a student is recommended for services outside the neighborhood school, then the IEP team would be recommending specialized transportation. And there can be equipment and supports, such as different types of seatbelts and child restraints, wheelchair lifts, things like that on the specialized transportation on the bus. Okay, next slide. Parents sometimes ask us, families sometimes ask us about change to school assignments. There is a process for what we call COSAs, change of school assignment. We shorten it to COSA. On the MCPS website, there is information about the process if a family is considering a change from what's recommended at their neighborhood school. There is a policy for review of these change of school assignments. Parents may notice, families may notice that if you go on the website now, it says that it's closed, that the deadline has passed. Let's go back to the other slide. It says that the COSA process, the timing has closed. That is different for students with IEPs. So if you have not yet had your IEP meeting and your child is recommended for your neighborhood school, and for some reason there is a hardship that you want considered for a change of school assignment, then you would still have the option to apply for that, even though it looks like on the website that the deadline has passed, because it's unique for students with IEPs. Students who are recommended for services outside the neighborhood school, there is a unique process through the Department of Special Education. If there's a consideration for a change of school assignment outside of a school where the special services are. And your parent educators can always give you more information about that. Okay, I think we can move on. So this, I'm sure that Joy will share the slides with families, and there is a link here that gives you information about all of the services in Montgomery County. I'm going to talk about them briefly on the next few slides, but you will have a link here that will take you to the web page with information as well. I think we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so here's some information about special education services in Montgomery County. The first thing is speech and language services, and what that means is that there are some children with IEPs whose primary service, speech and language service. The only thing that they require for kindergarten is a primary service of speech and language. They're in their neighborhood school and they're receiving some services from a speech language pathologist to address needs in the communication area. Our homeschool model services are what you probably hear about a lot. And most of our students who are receiving special education services are receiving these homeschool model services. What that means is that the IEP team at the IEP meeting has really thought through when the child needs specially designed instruction. Is it for literacy? Is it for math? Is it for science and social studies? Is it throughout the day to address their needs in collaborating with peers or transitioning? What do their IEP goals address? And when do they need that specially designed instruction? And how much do they need? So how much service? When should it be in the regular classroom? Do they need some pull-out services? That's all part of the discussion of those services. And then the team would determine, those services should be addressed and received and provided in the home school, and, would move on to talk about those services. Those services in the home school can be delivered by a special educator, but also by the general education teacher, by the para educators in the school. So it's services delivered from a variety of different providers. Children often receive speech therapy as well. They might receive OT or PT. All those things can be delivered in the homeschool model. Okay, and then we start to move into our continuum of services that are more our self-contained settings, meaning that the children in the classroom all have IEPs. Our elementary learning centers are a self-contained setting. The students are working on general education curriculum and those grade level outcomes in our elementary learning centers. The services, again, are to address the students' goals and objectives that are in the IEP. Children can have assistive technology, they need differentiated instruction, but that's part of all of the services. Most of the time, students in our elementary learning centers do go to lunch and recess with their typically developing peers. And there is the opportunity in the regular school building for other opportunities to be with typically developing peers as the IEP team decides is appropriate. Our Learning for Independence services, or what we call LFI, are providing specially designed instruction for students who have cognitive disabilities, mild to moderate intellectual disabilities. The instruction does follow the alternate learning outcomes framework. So that's that modified in adaptations to the curriculum, with accommodations and supports. Can you go back to the slide before? Yeah. Okay, so we're talking about LFI, which is the fourth thing down there. There is services. It is a self-contained class, but they are in a comprehensive school building. And students have the opportunity for community-based life skills instruction. They do have the opportunity, because they're in a general education building, to have opportunities to learn with their general education peers, again, as the IEP team deems appropriate. So the decision. And again, that decision about alternate learning outcomes, if a child is being instructed on those outcomes, is made and has to be addressed every single year. I'm sorry. School community-based services are for students with significant cognitive disabilities who have more moderate to severe intellectual disabilities. There's a lot of needs in the areas of communication, personal management, socialization, behavior management. The services emphasize more intensive and direct individualized instruction, but there's also a community piece of learning that how to work and how to function in the community. Same thing here. The students are instructed on alternate learning outcomes, but that decision needs to be addressed every single year. We do have elementary autism services in the county. These are also self-contained classrooms in comprehensive school buildings. Our students receiving these services have a diagnosis of an autism spectrum disorder. They need significant learning and social supports to address their disability. The classrooms offer instruction utilizing those alternate learning outcome standards, continuing emphasis on development of language, social skills, student independence. The teaching practices and procedures are based on applied behavior analysis. But students, again, participate with their non-disabled peers in the school building as appropriate. And again, if the student is being instructed on alternate learning outcomes, that needs to be addressed every year. So I think now we can move on to the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, we did have a question. So one of the parents asked about, Mary Rose, you touched on it, but they were asking that if a child starts in alternative learning outcomes, ALO, will they be able to move back to gen ed? Is that something that's assessed every year? Which I know you did mention that part, but maybe just a
sure, absolutely. No, I think it can be very confusing. So absolutely, the student would not need to be assessed every year, but the IEP team, as you know, if you have a child in special education, there needs to be an annual review. So an IEP meeting at least once a year at a minimum, because that's your annual review. And at that annual review, if a student is on alternate learning outcomes, the IEP team every year does need to discuss whether that continues to be appropriate. That does not mean that your child has to go, that they need to do complete assessments all over again. There should be classroom data, classroom assessments. There's grade level assessments. There's some district assessments. There's all those things that they're taking data on a regular basis. They're taking data on the IEP goals, and all of those things are information that they would be using to determine, do we need to be looking at this student moving back to the general grade level outcomes. Now, if there's questions, then they might ask for some additional assessment and ask for your permission to do that, because they want to make sure the really main point of assessment is really to make sure that there's good data for the IEP team, again, including you, to make good decisions. And when teams feel that there's questions that they can't answer without more data, those are the times when they would be saying, we'd like to do some additional testing because we need to have really good data to make good decisions. But that decision needs to be revisited every year. We do have some students who will move to the general education, general outcomes. The thing to be transparent, and what I would want families to know is, because we would never want you to feel misled, is that the longer a student does stay on alternate learning outcomes and instruction there versus instruction on the general outcomes, the further that they are moving away from having that depth and breadth of the curriculum to be able then to get to high school and pass those high school assessments to get a diploma. And, one of the things I focus, and I live in the little people, I do pre-K and kindergarten. And when I look at the standards in kindergarten for general education and then the alternate standards, I don't see a whole lot of difference at the kindergarten level. I really don't. There's not as much depth and breadth. I showed you the example of that, but there's not a whole lot of difference. The further you get up in grades, you will see that the standards diverge a lot more. So that is something, as a parent, that I would want you honestly to know, that as the child gets older, the standards grow further and further apart because the complexity grows further and further apart. And that's when you start to see it harder, that the older the child is, it's harder to go back to the general education and the general standards, because they may have missed a lot more of what they would need to know. I hope that makes sense and answers the question.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, and that was the only
Thank
question.
you. That makes sense to us. So is it going both ways? So if you are in the general education, when you do the review, they may put you in the ALO in the next year. So that's go both ways.
Yes, the conversation happens both ways. Yeah.
Okay.
We've had students who start off in kindergarten, first grade, in a general, following the gen ed standards. And then maybe by third grade or fourth grade, it becomes more evident that larger gap. And so then the conversations, but like Mary Rose said, that's a yearly conversation. And it's a big decision, right? So it's one that you would be completely like a part of. There's a whole conversation around, what their scores are, what their cognitive level is, what kids, capabilities are. So you're not just going to ease into that conversation and ease right out, because it is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a pretty lengthy conversation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I just jump in real quick? As a parent with a first grader who we actually made the decision from kindergarten to first grade to move to ALO, I was so thankful this year, because it is a very lengthy conversation. There is a beautiful rubric that really shows where your child's needs are and all of that. And to talk through that step by step with the IEP team and everything, I felt very comfortable. Whereas a couple of years ago, when I had kind of looked at it, the rubric wasn't quite set up yet. And it was very uncomfortable to make that decision, because it kind of felt like check yes or check no. But it is, as a parent, I felt much better looking through it, going step by step, and seeing that in our case, for my child, this was what was best. So just wanted to add
that's
that.
a great, you know what, though, that also speaks highly to your relationship with your team.
Yeah.
So I think
I
that's
have
great.
an awesome team.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that makes my heart happy.
Yeah,
because
me
we
too.
know
Thank
that,
you for sharing
yeah,
that.
because we know that a
Really.
lot of times that, that's the hardest part for parents, is that they don't always feel like they're a part of the team, or they don't always feel like they're being heard. And so I just, I think it's wonderful that you shared that. And I think it's also important, because Chia and Erica actually asked that specifically, that idea that it's not a simple, like, oh, we just think this. It's very much around, where your child falls. And then sort of the final decision is like, there are some kids it kind of hovers. And I think, Haiti, you mentioned something about you really haven't seen people like go the other way, right? Like once you're sort of on ALO. But I do think what you said in here is also important. I think we're all so conditioned, right, to believe our kids need a high school diploma. But really, when we step back, like, what is it that our kids need, right? They need a happy, productive life. And for some of our kids, that path might include a high school diploma and those next things. For some of our other kids, it's opportunities to be active members of the community, right? Working and, maybe going to school, but maybe not. And so I think it's that idea of knowing what are the supports and what are the services, what are the benefits that your child will get as they age, right? And the opportunities that can be presented if, they're kids who are receiving ALO services. So
And we know all children can learn. We know that all children can learn, but we have to figure out what's the right way for them to learn. And, as Mary Beth said, some children will learn better without that depth and breadth of the standards, but they're still learning and growing and progressing and moving towards a full life. It might be a little bit different than another child.
Agreed. And absolutely, the statement is we all need a meaningful education, and you can also get that through ALO, and you're 100% right. Because it's all about matching what kids need, right? So
absolutely.
Good conversation, you guys.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Should I move on to the next? Go back and share, and we'll
Yes,
go
please.
through your slides. Okay. I think you had finished this one.
Yes, we're on to the next
Okay.
one.
Yep.
So these special education services are very, very specialized. So they're really for a very small amount of students. The first services that are called AAC, Augmentative and Alternative Communication. So the thing about Augmentative and Alternative Communication, AAC can be used for any student if the IEP team determines it's appropriate, and in any type of classroom or services. We do have very limited classrooms, 2 classrooms that are specifically named. I think it's still 2, augmentative and alternative communication classrooms. And these are really for students that need very intensive support, focused truly on their communication because they're nonverbal, they have severe intelligibility issues. They're following the general education curriculum and working on those general standards. They need a device in order to access the curriculum. And the emphasis is really on that system to enhance their language development, their vocabulary development. The services are provided in a general education environment most of the time, and they're only in 2, like, as I said, 2 elementary schools. So the majority of our young students who are going into kindergarten do need some type of communication instruction, but they don't need a class that is really focused just on that communication. They often have multiple needs where they need multiple services. These particular classes are really focused on that augmentative and alternative communication, which is why there's only 2 in the entire county. We do have some classes for physical students whose primary disability is physical disabilities. So they're in a general education class, but they really need some comprehensive supports to address their physical needs. So we have children with physical disabilities in all types of services. These are very specialized to children that their primary disability is that physical disability. So their motor needs are really what is the primary disability that's standing out. We do have some really specialized services for students who are deaf or hard of hearing, and some very specialized services for students who are visually impaired. Again, these are very specialized for the smaller number of students. Okay, I think we can move to the next slide. So Longview and Stephen Knowles are two special schools in Montgomery County who provide instruction for students ages 5 to 21 who they're designed really for students with severe to profound disabilities and or intellectual disabilities. And the IEP really is providing the foundation for their educational programming. Students are learning to develop skills in the areas of communication, academics, mobility, self-help. Students are instructed on those alternate learning outcomes. So these are special education schools. So students don't have access typically in these schools to be with their typically developing peers. Longview is attached to regular elementary school, so there are some opportunities possibly there for exposure to non-disabled peers, but these schools are very small. They serve a small amount of students, and that is because there's a small amount of students that need this level of service. Next slide. So sometimes we have families that ask us about kindergarten waivers, and meaning that they believe that their child is not ready for kindergarten yet, and they would like them to have another year as a pre-K student. Kindergarten waivers, this is a general education process. It is not a special education process. It's for all kindergarten eligible students. The state law allows that for 3 exceptions to attendance, families can apply for a kindergarten waiver. And these are what you can see here is what the attendance requirements, what the exceptions are. Can be for immaturity, because the parent wants to keep the child in a licensed child care center or in a registered family child care. Kindergarten waivers do not mean retention in preschool special education services. Again, it's a general education process. If families feel that they want their child to be on a kindergarten waiver, then the process is really to go to the neighborhood school and apply for the exemption. And, our parent educators do have information about this, that they can, help a family know where to go and how to apply for that waiver. Okay, next slide. I sort of addressed this a little bit. Next slide. As I said, you want to talk, if you are considering a kindergarten waiver, then you can talk to your parent educator or a program specialist, and they can help you, get the form, bring it to your home school so that you can apply for that exemption to kindergarten attendance. Okay. And I am going to turn this over to Mary Beth.
Hi, everyone. If we could go to the next slide, Joy. So this is really just sort of a PSA, actually. It's a way for me to let you guys know that we have a special education family support center, and I am the family support services coordinator. So a lot of times when parents have questions or concerns, and it could be this kind of a thing, like we're getting ready to have our meeting, I don't know what questions to ask, or we had our meeting and I don't really understand some of it. Parents will call me after they've had an IEP meeting or after or before, and we'll just sort of talk through things. So if you are looking for somebody who can, provide you some information about something you've heard or about a question that you have, I'm certainly a good place to start, because if I don't know the answer, I'm the person who'll help you find the answer. We also host a bunch of workshops throughout the year. We've done for pre-K, we've done once a month during school day, and our school age ones are typically in the evenings. So those can also be found on the website. I have a lot of resources. A lot of them are probably things that you guys already know. And, Down Syndrome Network is a great resource for all of you. But there are also organizations that help with, sometimes we have families who need help with diapers. We have families who need help with, just sort of future planning. I mean, your kids are only going into kindergarten, but you're going to have to start thinking, once they get through elementary school, those next steps about, what happens with the Disabilities Association and those kinds of things. So really just understanding what you don't know to help you sort of make those preparations and plans. But that's the email. You can actually email me just directly if you'd like. And that cell phone number is 100% the best way to get a hold of me, because I'm only part-time. I am a retired elementary school principal, and I'm back doing this job part-time for MCPS. So, but if parents call me or text me, I will end up returning that call and setting up a time. So absolutely, that's the best number to reach me at. And then I think there's another slide, Joy. Yeah, so this is just another great resource. I mean, I mentioned that there's a lot out there. Obviously, Down Syndrome Network of Montgomery County is a great one for all of you, but Parents Place of Maryland also they offer like parent trainings. They offer different workshops and different resources for families. If you go to that website, you'll see they have just like a lot of links to resources. So you could put in preschool and toileting, and it'll come up with like some articles or they used to have, I haven't checked recently, but recorded videos of, workshops that they've done. So it's really just sort of building your bank of parent resources, because we know this parenting gig is tough, right? No matter what. And so when we add sort of a new layer of knowledge that we have to have, it's helpful to have other people who are in our corner. And so Parents Place Maryland is just a great resource. So I would recommend that you look there. And then I think that next slide is questions and answers, hopefully. Yeah. So a couple of questions that came up. There was a mom who asked in Spanish about how will she know where her son goes to school. So I used Google Translate and hopefully responded correctly. And then we had a question about that they have a child who has multiple needs, major needs, and primary disabilities right now are developmental delay and being deaf, but she also has some physical needs. Will one school actually fulfill all of her needs?
And absolutely, one school can meet all those needs. As part of your IEP meeting and the discussion, you would be talking about what her strengths are, because we know every child has strengths, and then what her needs are, how we can support those needs, what are the goals she needs to work on, and then what would those services look like across the different areas? What kind of specially designed instruction does she need? Speech therapy, OT, PT, what kinds of services? And then where would be the best place to meet those? And we absolutely can meet all of those needs in one place. We just want to make sure that we get a really good picture of what her strengths and her needs and what we need to do to meet them. But absolutely, those needs can be met in one location.
And then another question was, is there any, I'm sorry, she and Erica, did you want to add to that? I apologize.
Oh, we just want to say thank you. And also, she is receiving all those services you mentioned in the chat class right now. But since she's totally deaf, so she cannot learn verbal languages. So we rely on the ASL, but seems like in the PEP class, it's not a lot of those language development for her. So we are just wondering, when she steps into kindergarten, how would that change, or how would she able to receive language development in that environment?
So
you're really hard to hear, but
oh sorry. Can I repeat that?
No, I think we got some of Mary Rose. You were gonna.
No, I was going to say, overall language needs, everything, can be addressed. The IEP team is going to take into consideration when you meet all of her needs. If I don't want to get into real specifics about, because I don't know your child, but please feel free. I can share my contact information. You're welcome to reach out to me or to Mary Beth. If you want to talk to someone beyond your IEP team, I always tell families to start with their parent educator or their IEP team. But if you would like to talk to one of us separately about your child, then you are more than welcome to do that. But whatever is recommended for your child at that meeting, that those services need to be able to address all of her needs.
Well, great. We appreciate that. We very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. In the IEP meeting, sometimes we don't feel like the concern are being met. So that's something like we're trying to
do a contact.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so please feel free to reach out. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
And then there was a question about whether or not somebody can get another year of PEP.
So that's not an uncommon question. We do get asked that. To be very honest, we retain very, very, very few students. And That's really for a couple of reasons. MCPS overall has a policy that for kindergarten through second grade, we retain very few students with and without IEPs. And that's really because it's such a young age. We really want children to be with their typically developing age peers. And we don't want to prevent that from happening. We also have such a wide variety, of specially designed instruction and services in the county that we want children to be able to have the opportunity to move on with their typical peers and to be able to get their needs met and to be able to grow and learn and stay with the grade level curriculum and their age, their same age peers. And because we feel that, we can meet a variety of needs in a variety of different ways. There a very few amount of students, as I said, are retained. It's typically because there's a student who may have been hospitalized due to a medical condition or something where they've missed a lot of school. Those are typically more situation. It is not an administrative decision. It is an IEP team decision, but with the input of the principal at the current school. So the administrator does need to be involved.
Okay, and then
sorry.
No, go ahead.
A question on that. Speaking specifically to Down syndrome, since Down syndrome is generally labeled as developmentally delayed. It would seem to me that could be a pretty good reason to get an extra year of PEP, because while of course we would all want them to follow along with their peers, if they're not developmentally at the same rate where the rest of their peers are, then are we, possibly setting them up for failure when we're pushing them into such a rigorous curriculum already in kindergarten, and just giving them an extra year to prepare for that could be really beneficial.
So the children that we serve, in our pre-K services that have special needs and have IEPs, all have IEPs, whether they have Down syndrome or autism or just developmental delays, or they all have needs that are different than their non-disabled peers. That's why they have an IEP. But the IEP process is designed to address all of those needs. So moving on to kindergarten, the goal is to look at what the needs are, look at what kinds of services, supports, accommodations a child needs, and then be able to meet those needs in kindergarten or first grade at the grade level to address that, which is why we do have a continuum of services. Every child should be and must be considered to be served in their neighborhood school. And that is where we would like the majority of children are served there, no matter what their disability. We have children in our neighborhood schools that are even on alternate learning outcomes that are being served in their neighborhood schools. And that's how it should be. But we do have other services too, if the IEP team determines that those aren't appropriate. So we work to keep kids with their grade level peers, knowing that we are obligated to meet whatever those needs are and not to push them to something where they're not going to learn and grow and be able to make progress and to move closer to what we would expect of a child their age who doesn't have an IEP. So
we did have one who was asking about, and I did respond, but just to keep everybody in the loop, asked about the child in kindergarten still wearing a diaper, really fighting with him to, learn to use the potty, but so far it's not working, and looking for strategies. And does diapers prevent attendance in kindergarten? So no, you don't have to be potty trained to attend kindergarten or any school. And yes, there are strategies out there, but really what I was saying to Mom is, a lot of our kids struggle with this. So, don't feel like it's never going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, right? Like, we're going to work on that as a goal, but that I would certainly be happy to share strategies, because we did do a potty training workshop actually. So I think the interpreter helped with that one. So if you can get Mom to maybe put her email in, that'll help, and I can reach out to her tomorrow.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, I know Mary Beth, I know that they've done that workshop. So
yeah, we did a potty training one.
Yeah.
You know what? It was me who translated, but if for I just put the question in Google Translate, but I will email you the mom's email.
I just got it. She sent it.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great.
Okay.
Joy, I want to make sure that my contact information, I'm going to put it in the chat,
Okay.
because I want to make sure that any of the families have it if they want it. I think Mary Beth's, I know, was on the slides, and I'm assuming you're going to be able to share the slides with families.
Yes, absolutely. So I will, and actually I want to go get the program evaluation link and drop it in the chat, but it'll probably be Monday. I will send everybody the slides and the contact information for Mary Beth and Mary Rose so that, the parents can reach out to them with questions. You have shared so much information. This has been such an incredibly valuable presentation. I'm sorry we didn't have more parents here to take advantage, but I know that lots of them will watch the recording that we made. And thank you for allowing us to record it. And I just want to thank you. We're so lucky to have you here with us tonight. And
Thank you. Thank you for having it. And we really want parents to feel that they are part of the team and that they're engaged in their child's education and they feel like they can participate. And, so we want to make sure that they feel like, that they're an active participant when they're making decisions for their child. So
Agreed. And again, I mean, no matter what, you can always call. I've had parents call me actually for a friend, so if you have people who are like struggling, and again, I'm not saying I'm the expert, but I am pretty good at finding people who are. So if I'm not the immediate contact who ends up helping you, I will find the people who can help you.
And she helps a lot of families.
So your recommendation is if you are struggling with your parent educator or don't feel they're answering, we should come to you, Mary Beth, first, and you can help out?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll be honest with you. I would walk you through sort of what I see as sort of ways to have a productive relationship. But I mean, at this stage of the game too, if it's been a year and there's just, some struggles, then really sometimes, I mean, I've attended meetings too, not as I'm nobody, like I'm not a big deal, right? But I've attended to be sort of like a moral support for families.
Right.
And then also to help sort of that language, right? So when the school says something, so again, I'm a former principal, right? So sometimes my staff would talk about numbers and you could see everybody, like parents are like, they have no idea what these numbers mean, right? So things are only relevant in your lens of the world. So you have to step back and expand that, right? So I think that's sort of where I come in, that I'm most helpful, because it's never accusatory on my end. It's more like, I just don't think they understand what you're asking for. Or I don't think, that you're hearing what mom is actually saying, so those conversations I think have just led to some productive outcomes. So yes,
Wonderful.
I mean, if you're at a place now where you feel like I really have tried and, I'm not sure about it, absolutely, like reach out, because if nothing else, moving into next year, we really want to make sure that parents understand how to positively advocate for their kid and also like work on those collaborative partnerships with the school, because I mean, you are partners. And I think sometimes parents very easily find themselves like participating in a team meeting, but not being a team member. And, it's hard sometimes, right, to sort of stand up because you feel like you've got a table full of people, even though those table full of people are there for your kid, right? They really are. But it still feels like you're standing alone in that space because you're the only parent, right? The other people are the educators at the school. So, anything that I can do in that sense to make that relationship better, 100%, I'm here for that.
Yeah. And Mary Beth, can always stay in touch with me. And if, you're always welcome to call the PEP office and, as well, because the staff are part of the PEP program. So you're always welcome to call the PEP office too.
Wonderful. I have one more general question too. I know prior to pandemic, I was told prior to pandemic, they would often do like, okay, the tour is coming up for kindergarten and you can tour a learning center and you can tour an LFI classroom and you can tour a homeschool model. And they would kind of do, from what I understand, community type tours. Mm-hmm. Then pandemic happened and everything shut down. And then actually when I was taking mine to kindergarten, it was kind of this wish, wash, mishmash. I don't know how to learn about anything. and we don't really have anything to offer you. Is there a general idea for how parents can learn about each program, get an overview? I mean, you guys really did a great job here too, but I'm wondering if there are other ways that are offered to the entire community.
So there are tours set up for the learning centers, for LFI, for some of them are, like I said earlier, some of them are in person, some of them are virtual, but I don't want families to think if it's virtual. We actually did the virtual tours last year and got such great feedback, which is why we continued them at like some of the, but because what it is there's a group of parents in a room with a parent educator or a program specialist, and then there's someone at the school doing the tour without everybody walking into the classroom, but they're in there with an iPad live doing the tour. And people are explaining what's happening and then answering questions. So it's like being there, but everybody's not going into this classroom. Only one person is. So it's less distracting to the kids, actually.
Right.
But some of them are in person. It depends on how it got set up, but they are happening and there is a schedule. So if typically what the parent educators will do is they'll say to a family, we're considering, we're looking, you should see your home school. We may be considering some other things. So, here's the information about the tour. That doesn't mean if a family really feels that there's something they want to see, they can certainly ask the parent educator about it, and about if there's a tour, and the parent educator may try to explain why it seems appropriate to see it or not, but they won't stop families from seeing things.
Okay.
So we don't publicize them like on a website or something, but there are tours set up. It's just that because it's disruptive to the kids in the school, we try to keep them sort of on a smaller basis and limit the amount of people for each one, so it doesn't just become a lot of people going into the school building or in it, coming to a big room and it's just a crowd of people because they're curious, so.
All right. I think, yes, Mary Beth is going, and it's 8:30. So I want to be respectful of your time, Mary Rose and Mary Beth. You guys have just shared so much. I see there's a new message in Spanish.
I'm going to try to throw it into Google.
Mary Beth, thank you.
You
All right. Well,
I think that was somebody responding to somebody else, unless I did it wrong.
all right. Well, I'm going to just, in the interest of time, and I want to respect your time. Thank you on behalf of the Down Syndrome Network of Montgomery County. We are so thrilled that you were here for this presentation. Thank you, parents. I know it was a ton of information. I will send out the slideshow and their contact information on Monday. You'll all receive an email, and the recording, I'll let you know when the recording is available. But thank you all, and everybody have a great night and a great weekend. And thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies. Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.